Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning to the 2021 Talent Summit. I'm Jared Goldsmith, and thank you for working with ESAC's virtual events. First off, can everybody hear and see me? Please do a little thumbs up at the bottom right of your screen. Oh, thank you very much. Or likewise, you can make a comment in the chat feature, the general chat. Now, at this time, folks, all of your cameras and microphones are muted. Please sit back, relax. We have a great lineup for you today for the talking about talent. The previous networking lobby mode with all of the tables is not available. So any questions, please note them in the general chat and we'll be able to help you in real time. At this time, I would like to invite Su-Ling Ching and Michael Curran to the stage. Su-Ling and Michael, please unmute your camera and microphones.
Waiting for my camera to come up. There you are.
Thank you, Michael. Over to you.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see all of you here at the 2021 Talent Summit. My name is Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. I'm joined by Su-Ling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, who's just showing up on the screen. Hey, Su-Ling.
Good morning, Michael.
How are you doing?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm excited. We've been planning this for weeks and months, and so it's fun to see the event finally here and gather all these great business leaders to talk about a really important issue in our city.
I agree. I'm thrilled to be here today too, and thank you for working with us on this as usual, because it's a really important economic issue to the business community. And we're really grateful to, of course, our valued sponsors and our volunteer presenters who make these conversations possible.
Absolutely. Grateful to be on this platform, by the way, just to mention that. I saw lots of interaction going on already, and we encourage people, whether we're in that floor plan networking mode or whether we're in presentation mode, to keep on connecting. One thing is maybe two things. We've been on this platform a few times, Su-Ling, that popped to mind. One is the importance, I think, of updating your profile, and it's been mentioned in the chat. So again, for everyone, I don't know if you can do it in this mode, by the way, but click on your profile, use the pencil. You can update, add a photo, which makes it a lot more personal when people are bumping into each other. But the other thing is you can see, as people can see, you can keep chatting with each other, both in a group chat or a private chat, which I think is really kind of cool. And we'll be using both the chat and the Q&A during our presentations. Over to you.
Really is. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say over to you, Su-Ling, to kick things off.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you, Michael, so much. And yes, we all are getting used to this this virtual meeting and all of these great tools, and so encourage everyone to take full advantage until we get back to our in-person. As I said, we're thrilled to be here today. The Board of Trade, as Ottawa's business advocate and a key economic stakeholder, our mission is to cultivate a thriving, world-class business community. So that's why we get together and have these conversations and convene our business and community leaders to discuss these key matters. One of which, of course, is talent. We hosted the City Building Summit in the spring, Michael, with much success, and we're looking forward to the Small Business Summit on October the 19th. More details to come after this summit. So they're really designed to provide thought leadership so that we can think about opportunities for us in a global marketplace. We're looking forward to hearing from Stephen around that, information, ideas, and inspiration that businesses can use starting today. And of course, valuable connections that people can make. So if people really want to make the most of this time investment, because time is precious to all of us, use the networking platform, which is so cool and that Jared has supported us on, and following up with connections. And I encourage people to take notes during the presentations so that you can share key points with your teams when you get back with your teams. And on this platform, as Michael said, use the chat, use the Q&A, ask questions of these experts, because it's really a great opportunity to hear from them. This talent is our second talent summit ever. The first was pre-pandemic, and But what we know, Michael, of course, is that talent has been identified as a top issue in our business community through our business growth survey every year. And it's continued to evolve and maybe even escalate during this pandemic. So we really rely on at the Board of Trade, our volunteers, and we're really grateful to our talent committee who have been working hard throughout all of this last 3 years, as we have been working to support businesses in their own growth, their ability to attract and retain talent, but also to advise governments at all levels on programs and policies that help make Ottawa a competitive business environment. So with all of that, that's why we're so excited to be here today and listen to not just experts in the field, but also businesses themselves. You're going to be talking to some of the best places to work in Ottawa. And I know we had a fabulous recognition event last night. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. And we're also really excited to hear from the economic partners that are already doing a lot of great work in this area. So if there's one lesson we've learned this past year, it's that together we are strong. So we want to look for opportunities to collaborate today. So let's get started, Michael.
And just before we introduce our keynote, Su-Ling, of course, as you mentioned, events like this depend on volunteers and the great people at the Board of Trade. It includes presenters, but also sponsors. So let me recognize some of those sponsors right now. RBC, a special thank you to Kelsey Fetteux for joining us. Meldrum Horn, thank you, Michael Horn. Michael was with us last night at Brook Street Hotel to recognize the best places to work recipients. We had lots of fun. Great to see everybody face to face. So we did have an in-person component of this. Also, the Employment Accessibility Resource Network, EARN. We are joined by Lee Kelly. Thank you to her. U Ottawa Co-op. Thank you to Chantal Yell. Chantal and I were speaking last night and reflecting on the importance of co-op. And speaking of co-op, another co-op partner here with us today, the cooperative education people from Carleton University. Also, taking a step up at the university, we've got Sprott with us here today. Travis Fleeler's with us. Sprott just opened a spectacular new, I think it's a $65 million dedicated business building. So hopefully we'll have an event at that space when the pandemic allows us to do so. Also, a big shout out to ESAC's virtual events. Thank you to Jared Goldsmith for doing some of the behind the scenes stuff today. And at OBJ and the Board of Trade, Ottawa Business Events, we've got a global event partner, a partner that supports us in all of our events, and it's Oakwood, which of course, if you don't know, does home renovations, custom homes, really on the cutting edge of construction, energy management, all that type of stuff. So of course, without these partnerships, this event wouldn't be possible. So please make your way. There's a couple, when we're not in this mode, when we're in the kind of the floor plan mode, the sponsors have logoed tables and you can go talk to them. So if you want to have a co-op conversation, for example, go to one of the logoed tables. If you want to speak with Meldrum Horn, I saw Michael Horn at that table earlier today, or some of his people. So Lee, I'm going to duck out right now, and then you can start introducing. I guess we have a special guest coming up, but I'll leave the honors to you. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Michael. And this guest needs no introduction. He's a great supporter and partner of the Board of Trade. So I'd like to welcome now to the stage His Worship Jim Watson, Mayor of the City of Ottawa.
Good morning, Su-Ling, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Thank you very much, Su-Ling and Michael, for the great work that you're doing, Jared, and all of the sponsors, and allowing me to say a few opening comments. This summit, of course, is on the future work as an opportunity to learn about emerging trends and how to grow your business in these challenging times. And this is a timely discussion as we navigate our way through this stage of the pandemic. And I want to thank the many distinguished speakers and participants for joining this conversation and sharing your expertise with members of the business community here in Ottawa. Now, COVID-19 has rapidly changed the way we work, and we recognize it has had a disproportionate impact on many sectors of our economy, including tourism, hospitality, and Main Street businesses. Although I have to say that we're doing very, very well as a city. We're believe the latest stats I saw were the best large city in Canada in terms of percentage of vaccinations for our residents. So 12 and over, we now have 83% of our residents vaccinated, and I look forward to boasting and sharing that figure with the Prime Minister as he tours one of our vaccination centers here in Ottawa later today. Alors, Saint-Anjou est présent partout au Canada, and as part of the Ottawa's economic recovery and rebound strategy, the city recognizes the challenges with talent attraction, retention, and development. And this is not a unique issue to Ottawa, it's happening around the world. The city is committed to working with business communities, the Board of Trade, BIAs, to address concerns and facilitate measures that will help businesses as we emerge from the pandemic. Our talent team at Invest Ottawa is also very busy helping startups and local tech companies find qualified and experienced candidates from around the world to fill local vacancies. The strategy has so far been very successful, and I know Natalie MacArthur will provide a very good update later this morning. But before we get there, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker this morning, Future of Work expert Stephen Harrington, partner in human capital consulting with Deloitte's national lead on workforce strategy. Je vous souhaite à tous une conférence productive qui mènera à des solutions à court et à long terme. Have a great morning and a productive summit. And over to our guest speaker, Stephen Harrington. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mayor Watson. And have fun with the Prime Minister later today.
Will do.
Will do. Okay. So before we get to our guest speaker, I'd like to say that we want you to be able to use the, sorry, I'm just lost for a second here, the Q&A section during the keynote presentation. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and type them in on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll go through those questions after the presentation. So now it's my pleasure to hand things over to Justin Sherman, who's the Regional Vice President of RBC, to welcome this morning's presentation. Justin?
Well, I'm sorry, Justin is currently not in the platform right at this moment. Maybe Suling, you'd come and advise?
That'd be great. Good morning.
We can loop back in.
Actually introduce our keynote anyway. So now we're going to invite Stephen to the stage to make his presentation. He is the national lead for the future of work at Deloitte. I've had the pleasure of meeting with Stephen prior to this, and I know that you are going to really benefit from his insights and his knowledge, as I have already. So welcome, Stephen, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to my office. Isn't this strange? Here we are still living through the pandemic. What I want to talk to you about today is that, for sure, as the mayor mentioned, COVID in the future of workspace has changed everything. But I will tell you that, believe it or not, I've been writing and speaking about the future of work as a topic since 2011, long before it was cool. And I can tell you that I want to cover two things today. One, certainly, we're going to talk about what is often called the next normal, which is all of our clients, and I'm not exaggerating, are in one way, shape, or form trying to figure out the where of work post-pandemic. Where are people going to work? And if people are going to have flexibility to decide where they're going to work, how are we going to provision that? That's a big question in the market today. But I do also want to take time to talk about all the other issues in the future of work. Those things that we were already struggling with before the pandemic that are still in play and we need to pay equal attention to. And as Suling mentioned, I'd love questions. I'm going to give you a bit of a presentation today, try and give you an overview, but also would love to explore what's on your mind specifically. It may be the Great Resignation. Why are so many people considering leaving their jobs these days? It might be how these things apply to different industries or small and medium enterprises. Happy to talk about it all. If you can advance to the next slide. So this may seem obvious, but really what I want to center my talk on today is work itself, the work that people do every day in their jobs. That's That's what's changing, and it's been changing for a long time. And there are some orthodoxies, some ways that we think about work that need to shift if we're really going to keep pace with this trend. Next slide. I'll give you one example. It's one that didn't come true. So if you went back to 2013 and 2014 and you looked at the literature on future of work, what you would have seen is a lot of worrying about the end of the world. There was a very reputable university that did a great study. The math was really interesting. It basically said that by 2020, 50% of jobs were going to be disrupted by automation. Why were they so worried? It really was because automation, which had long been impacting the transportation, logistics, and manufacturing industries in our country, was now prepared to take on so-called white-collar jobs. Now, of course, by 2020, 50% of jobs weren't disrupted. So maybe it's not a robot apocalypse. But I will say this, it does make sense for us to pay attention to the technology trends here very carefully. In 1974-ish, there was a study done which really tickled me. I found it was a bunch of academics who were looking at technologies that were emerging, and they predicted by 1980 that somewhere around 30 to 40% of Americans would be working from home. It was a study on telework. And of course, they were wrong. There weren't nearly that many people working from home in 1980. But like a lot of technology predictions, they got the prediction right. They got the timeline wrong because we were way past those percentages in 2020 and 2021. Next slide. What we are really focusing on in our research and our work is not a robot apocalypse, but an unleashed workforce. And I'll touch on this more later, but it's worth having in mind as we walk through. I'm going to submit to you that the most powerful combination in the market today isn't a human alone, and it isn't a technology alone. It is those places where we've figured out how to bring the machine and the human together to really advance productivity. That sort of unleashed workforce, and a very human workforce, by the way. Next slide. One of the questions I often get is, why are we spending so much time talking about the fourth industrial revolution? There have been 3 others, and we kind of got through them okay. So I really want to talk just for a moment about pace. One of the biggest challenges we're facing isn't just that it's an industrial revolution with all the trimmings, which means disruption in business models. It means humans trying to adjust to new technologies. The big problem with the fourth industrial revolution is pace. And if you look at the histogram here, you can kind of pick up the point. It took a long time to get from the typewriter to the personal computer, decades and decades. And there's an overlap period in those decades that allowed more and more people to get used to the new technology before it hit the workforce. We forget that the same thing's true of the cell phone in the middle of this histogram. I mean, if you've been around as long as I have, you might remember the early cell phone was actually the car phone, and that was the 80s. It took from then until arguably 2010 before that technology became a business machine. And that, again, is a long time for people to get used to the idea that this technology was going to change the way they work. That's no longer happening. What we're seeing now are technologies like the one we're on right now being invented and rolled out within a period of weeks or months. And that is creating a whole new set of challenges for how all of us, regardless of the size of our business, regardless of the industry we're in, manage our business and our workforce. Next slide. Let me get into the practicalities of what I mean by using future skills as an example. The World Economic Forum in the summer, maybe it was the spring, they announced an emergency, and it had nothing to do with COVID. It was the future skills emergency. According to their data, 40% of the business skills that we use every day are set to change in the next 2 years. And that's a worrying statistic. I don't know of any business of any size that can afford to re-platform and reskill 40% of the skills their people are using. That's a big challenge. And as you can see, the types of skills that people are going to need are shifting. We're going to need a lot more. And this is an amazing stat to me because we've already had this conversation for a decade. But as much as we've moved towards technological and digital skills, we predict that's going to continue. More social and emotional skills and higher cognitive skills being more in demand. And there is a sort of an error that's sometimes made in thinking where we kind of push everybody to these skills at the top of the line, and we assume the skills below the line, the physical and manual and the basic cognitive skills, are not going to be needed at all. And of course, that's bananas. We're still going to need lots of people with those skills, just fewer than we do today. And there is a challenge in that. How do some of those people who are in the physical, manual, and basic cognitive space move into the higher cognitive, social, and emotional space? Next slide. Here's a way to think about the skills portfolio you have in your business that might be helpful. And I'm going to try and reverse a long trend on what we've often called hard skills. Those are the skills on the right-hand side here: the business, functional, technical, and scientific. I've already mentioned how quickly skills are changing and that we need to stay on top of that. But I'll add a stat that we have here at Deloitte that shows the half-life of the average technical skill is now 2.5 years. So that means that for your people with the most important technical skills in your business, they probably need a fairly significant refresh of those technical skills every 5 years. That's a far cry from the social contract we used to have in the 60s and 70s, which essentially said, go get your skill, make sure it's a good one, go to the market and you'll have a career. So I'm not sure those are really hard skills anymore. They're a little too brittle, but let's call them technical skills. And of course, they're really important to our business. It's not like we can walk away from them. But on the other side here, we have what I would call enduring capabilities. These are things that are both innate, which means they're about the personality of the people you have in their workforce, their conceptual thinking, their motivational drive, their emotional skills. All of these things can be measured, by the way, and have way more to do about somebody's psychology than they do about their ability to learn those pieces. So those are the innate enduring capabilities. But there are also enduring capabilities that can be taught. And you think about when somebody learns in a business context how to influence somebody. Once they learn how to influence somebody, your employee is going to be able to influence people for the rest of their career. There are a lot of skills that fit into this category. And so I hope that you can take a model like this away and begin to think about, if we are going to invest in skills, let's make sure we're balancing the enduring capabilities and the technical skills in that investment in our people. Because while we need the technical skills critically for next quarter and next year, those enduring capabilities are investments that are really going to last. One last enduring capability I'll tell you about. Just think about where we have architecture skills in our workforce. And if you're in IT, you might right away think about enterprise architecture. So these are people that know how all of our technology systems work and can fit them together in an ever-changing architecture to drive business results. But a lot of other people build architecture skills. Technical skills are underneath them, but there's an enduring capability. And I don't think we do a very good job of spotting them and recognizing them. The example I'll give, and you probably all know somebody who matches this, is somebody who learned a coding language, perhaps early in their career, and then they had to pick up a second one. And you notice by the time they pick up their third and their fourth programming language, they can do it really easily and very quickly. In fact, they probably complain about some of the courses they get sent on because so much of it is review and drives them bananas. That's because they've built an architecture skill, sort of this meta skill, if you will, about how coding works. And that is an enduring capability that will stay within their whole career. That applies to just about every technical domain. And we need to spot people that have that enduring capability. Next slide. So in case you needed, the maths reason why the skills question is important, Australia happens to have really great skills data in their labor market information. And we were able to see that by 2030, they were going to have a massive skills shortage that would cost them $36 billion per year by 2030, if not addressed. That is a $2.9 trillion problem globally. I actually feel this number may have changed and gotten higher because, frankly, we put it together 18 months ago and things have changed. Next slide. So why change? Why take on this big future of work challenge? Yeah, no, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. One of the reasons is productivity is in decline. Now, I'm cheating a little bit because you'll notice I don't have data from 2020 and 2021. The jury's out as to whether we've been more productive during COVID. We might have been, but look back at this period from 2010 to 2019. This is a period in which companies around the world invested more money in fourth industrial revolution technologies than ever before, and yet productivity growth was declining. Something is broken, and I submit to you that it's not the technology. The technologies know how to advance our business. It's the humans, it's the workforce that's struggling to keep up with the change and struggling to change that investment and translate that investment into more productivity. That's not a good news story. We need to do something about it. Next slide. Here's another reason why that's happening. If you think about, especially in large organizations, but it's happening to small and medium enterprises as well, we're heading back into this period of technology advancement where we might have a large enterprise resource planning type technology to run our business. We might not. But in either case, we're tacking on a lot of small, I often call them cheap and cheerful technologies to try and drive at productivity. But what's happening is people are losing productivity, switching between technologies, stuck in unnecessary meetings, doing duplicative work. And this is a massive drag on productivity. We have to think about how to rationalize the way humans are interacting with technology to make it more enabling. And here I'm hinting at a major point I'm going to try and make. I think we had a long habit of bringing in technologies to our business with the intent that it's going to transform our value and cost play. But we're asking the humans to try and adjust to those technologies as opposed to reversing the field and looking at the work that people do as our primary question. How could that work look if it was ideally designed? And then work backwards and figure out what technologies, processes, and structures and skills do people need to make that future vision of the work itself come true. I submit, a big idea. It's easy to say. It's a lot harder to do. And I'll cover it more in a minute. Next slide. I just want to hammer that point home in something I said at the beginning about the unleashed workforce, this idea of the person and the robot working together in concert, by talking a little bit about the checkered history of substitution. Sorry, this is the geekiest thing I'm going to say today. So hang on. If this is like, oh my God, what a geek, just hang on a second. It's going to get better. But this is interesting. Think about grocery store industry here in Canada. You probably heard through the pandemic that one of the major retailers built a dark warehouse. And by that, we mean automated warehouse where there were a lot fewer people working in the warehouse. And the reason they did it was so that they could distribute groceries to people's houses much more efficiently in a very large geographical region. Well, that's a pure substitution play, substituting technology where there used to be humans. And by the way, in this case, I'm actually raising a case where they saw tremendous cost and value added to their business. I'm sure their shareholders were super happy. And I'm not arguing that that was a bad move, but I will ask, how long do you think it will be before the other major grocery retailers have the same warehouses. And this is one of the things that a large percentage of the time tends to happen with substitution plays, is that they don't create sustained competitive advantage for any one player. They end up being a competitive advantage for the whole industry over the medium term. And so there's a cost and value play, but it erodes to some degree. It changes the landscape. Now, I'm not arguing that that's a bad play, but it's worth noting. It's also worth noting, for every success story like that grocery retailer had, there are less successful examples. So think about the same industry and think about the grocery store self-checkout. That was going to revolutionize retail. There were going to be way fewer people on the shop floor. Customers were going to happily check themselves out at the grocery self-checkout. It was going to be great. It didn't work. In fact, there are more people employed today paying attention to that self-checkout to make sure that it's operating properly, make sure people know what they're doing, to make sure there isn't leakage. And there are more people at checkouts, not less, at most of our grocery retailers in North America. So that was a substitution play that went after cost and value and missed. And now it's just part of the landscape. I submit that there's a whole other level we can bring people to, where if we can augment our people or even have them collaborate with technologies, we can win not only cost and value, but we can improve meaning for our workforce. And if we improve meaning for our workforce, it will impact our customers or the citizens that we're serving. I have a quick video I'd like you to watch that illustrates this point. So I love that video. And hopefully you can see how it demonstrates my point. What a wonderful teller. But because the technology was at her fingertips and it was informing her about the interests of her customers. It was about the way that she was augmented by that technology that made her not only charming, but deeply insightful in such a bizarre situation. And I love to pick on banking every once in a while because, they're great and they are way ahead on multi-channel. Everything that teller did could be available to you on your phone or your PC or telebanking, but there was something special, wasn't there, about that human interaction. And that's one of the reasons why I think the future of work is human. People post-COVID in particular are going to be seeking those meaningful human interactions. And this is the last point I'll make about the human is augmented. It's also a great play if you think about the future of the work that we can offer to our workforce. If we can design out the dull, the transactional, the expensive, or even the dangerous work through automation, through thinking about how in some cases maybe our full-time employees aren't the one to do those tasks. Maybe the gig economy is interested. If we can design those things out, then we can build work for our people, which is much more human. And that's what elevates out of just a pure cost and value play into a meaning play for our workforce and for our customers and citizens. So here you have, I just covered the human is augmented. These are 5, they aren't really trends. They're really part of the future of work, and they're the parts that have already happened. They're already here. They're already impacting the market. The next one I covered how serious the future skills issue is, but this trend is really about how we're seeing organizations start to respond. And that is by thinking about how to break learning down, make it faster, less expensive, and perhaps even more effective. And this is a concept you might hear it called work integrated learning or lifelong learning. This is something that's unfortunately true in the HR space. Sometimes these ideas bubble up and they sound like the flavor of the week. And if you're a jaded Gen Xer like me, you think, oh, is there really anything to this? There really is. If you remember what I said earlier, the reason this conversation about work integrated learning is happening is because of the pressures on us as employers to reskill our workforce. So I'll give you an example of there's an organization that's operating globally here in Canada as well called With You, With Me. I'll point them out as an example of this thinking. What they're doing, one of the things they're doing is working with retiring military members, giving them a test to see what their aptitude is like. If they do well on that, they're putting them in a boot camp, which is short. It's just a number of weeks to teach them how to operate in a security operations center. It's an entry-level cyber job. And then they have employers lined up to employ these people really quickly into these roles. This is disruptive because generally what we do as an employment market is we say, we're not going to hire you into cyber unless you've done a 2-year college degree or a 5-year university degree. We teach you everything about cyber, and then we jam you into an entry-level position where you can forget 95% of it. And that's the disruption in the model I just described to you. And it's something we can apply to the way we think about learning in our own workforces. How do we teach people just enough that they can get the idea of a concept, they can begin to build their toolkit, but then very quickly go and apply that thinking at work and gain real experience? So there are all kinds of ways to disrupt learning, and that's one of them that we should be looking into. The next the next trend that's true and is impacting us today is open talent is unavoidable. There's a stat in the United States that shows that by 2028, if the trend continues, there'll be more people employed, I use scare quotes, in the gig economy and in contracts than in full-time employment. A massive sea change in the US market. And Canada is a little muted from that, but it's not far behind. I know when we think about the gig economy, we tend to think about people doing Uber driver jobs or delivering fast food. And that absolutely is a big growth area. But there are a lot of other platforms out there. It's sort of the Wild West period of the gig economy. But there are very successful examples like Freelancer, TaskRabbit, and Topcoder. People forget about Topcoder. Right as we were flipping into 2020, in December 2019, Topcoder, in their press release, just to give a sense of how successful their cohort of people who are in cyber and coding and other technology skills on their platform, they boasted that their top coder was making 7 figures. And just think about when that percentage of people begin to look at alternative employment, and we as employers say we can't find talent, I submit that sometimes that's because there are fewer and fewer people that are interested in our damn full-time jobs. And we may need to begin to think about how to engage some of these folks that aren't interested. But by the way, this is a whole conversation on its own. If anybody wants to pick it up in the question period, I'm happy to. We do also have to think about how to create the right policy framework in Canada to make the gig economy safe and productive for Canadians. The next trend, we're used to thinking when we're thinking about emerging economies and power centers, we've been talking a lot about the BRIC economies for a long time: Brazil, Russia, India, China. And of course, they still bear watching. But from a future of work perspective, I'm a little more interested in North Africa and Southeast Asia. And that's because we're seeing young, dynamic, high-growth companies kind of come out of nowhere. What typically happens in so-called developing nations is they follow our technology pattern only a decade or more later. So right now, they should be lining up to buy all the hardware that we're moving out of as we move to the cloud. But a lot of these young companies aren't. They're moving directly to cell phones as their main and sometimes only business machine. And that's making them light and nimble with low-cost centers and incredibly competitive. An interesting thing to think about if you're a small and medium enterprise, why, some of these big organizations, mine included, are pretty invested in hardware. And it's going to take them a long time to get out. But if you're smaller, the network of cheap and cheerful technologies available is absolutely stunning and a huge opportunity. Finally, a trend happening right now is the rise of the social enterprise. We were talking about this at Deloitte before COVID. It has certainly only accelerated as a trend. And that is a trend for people in our workforce to really want something other than a paycheck to be their value proposition for why they work where they work. And resoundingly, and what we used to think was this was just about millennials and Gen Z, but the truth is this is a rising demand in almost every generation and stage of life, is people want purpose. You've probably heard about the Great Resignation, this idea that the Microsoft survey showed 40% of people were intending to leave their job in one survey. That's an absolutely astounding number. And look, it's clear that means people are going through something existential, something about their own lives through COVID that's caused them to sort of disconnect a little bit mentally, psychologically from their work and reflect on, am I doing what I should be doing with my life? What an amazing moment in history, but what a difficult moment for employers. I cannot stress enough that if you can make the social purpose of your organization clear, and especially if you can line it with your business strategy, that's a real recipe for keeping people engaged in what you're doing. Next slide. Great. So what I wanted to leave you with is an idea of some of the work that we're seeing clients do globally to get ahead of the future of work issue that I've been describing. And one is getting a lot more disciplined about identifying and building future skills. I talked a little bit about work integrated learning, but not yet about skills analytics. And I have a particular bias on this. I know you've all seen it. There are dozens upon dozens of articles, probably even within your industry context, that say, here are the top 10 skills of the future. And I get those sort of things sent to me every week. And people saying, hey, are these the right top 10? And I would much rather start the skills conversation by saying, why don't we talk about your business? And anybody can do this analytics. It's pretty simple. If you sit down with elements of your business and you just say, hey, what's your strategy look like 3 to 5 years from now? Let's say for the IT department, what are you going to do to advance the business? And okay, let's really talk about how what you're going to do to advance the business from a business strategy perspective is different than what you're doing today. Okay, therefore, since that's what you're going to do, what are the skills that you need to do it that either you don't have enough of or you're missing altogether? That little piece that I described to you might seem simple, but it's a way of making sure that we're anchoring the skills conversation in strategy. And then from there, think about exactly what roles need those skills. So now we're moving into exactly who needs to know these skills. And maybe even a conversation about capacity, because hey, if people are going to learn new skills, they need time to do it and they need time to apply those skills to work. So maybe this is an area where we could talk again a little bit about automation and all the sort of options to disrupt the work our people are doing. And then finally, what are our build, buy, and borrow strategies for getting those skills? Because we're probably, if you're of any size, not going to train your way out of this problem. You're going to need to think about sometimes hiring people who have scarce skills or borrowing them for a while, hoping that they can sort of infect the host, translate those skills into what you need, but also into your workforce more broadly. The next thing I've hinted at is this idea that we can bring data to redesign work at scale. So again, think about building job canvases, if you will, like just a picture of the work that like maybe the 3 or 5 top roles in your business. What could they look like 5 years from now if people were just focusing on only the things that added value for your business? And what falls out that you actually wish they wouldn't be spending their time on? And can we automate it? Can we stop doing it? Can we go to the gig economy? How do we rethink that work and then work backwards from that picture of ideal work to figure out what technologies and structures and skills we need to make it true? And then finally, last but not least, I said it last just because it's what usually people talk about first, and I thought I would give you a view of everything else, but just about every organization in the modern economy on the planet are thinking about hybrid work arrangements. One just little bit of advice I'll give you. Most clients that come to us that we end up working with, of course, the first thing they ask is, where should my people work? And how will I figure that out? How am I going to redesign my workplace? Can I save money on real estate? Those sorts of questions. And I think they're good questions. But I would pile on, and it's a lot like the first thing I said about skills. let's first talk about what you're trying to do as a business. And could you build a next normal strategy that suits your business strategy? So, for an example, imagine you're in the federal government and you're running a department that serves communities across the country. One of the options might be, hey, maybe we don't need to be centrally located anymore. Maybe it might make sense for some of those departments to locate in the communities they serve, staffed by people in the communities they serve. And maybe not, but it has to be worked through from a business strategy perspective, in my opinion, before you begin to think about, okay, now where should people work? And when, and don't forget that key question, how? Bringing in this conversation about how we're going to redesign work. I really do believe that if you're going to have a strong hybrid strategy for the future, it needs to have something for everyone. Up to 60% of Canadians are not going to be able to work from home, no matter what, when COVID's over. And I don't think that it would be fair or really healthy for our workforces collectively if we didn't think about how next normal would also have something in it for them, extending autonomy and trust as we are to the rest of the workforce. Awesome. So if you can just advance that was the presentation that I had available for you guys today. Would love to take any questions, provocations. Oh boy, Steve and I agreed with that. I didn't agree with the other thing.
Thank you, Stephen. I was fascinated by everything that you said, and I agree with most of it, except for the federal government does have to be in downtown Ottawa.
Great point. So hey, I accidentally stumbled on a big question, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is going to happen to downtown cores across the country? We're not 100% sure.
Mm-mm.
We know that a lot of employers are thinking about hybrid models where the pressure on their footprint might be reducing. Mm-hmm. And they may be moving out of leased spaces or even looking at divesting real estate. There's a real split in the real estate market. We have a real estate practice here at Deloitte, and even I feel like they argue with each other every day about whether that's actually going to be a huge opportunity for downtown cores. Because what they may see, one scenario, is a lot of different types of employers that haven't been able to afford downtown locations will pick up and move into those spaces to interact with those businesses that are still there but taking up less footprint. That's the scenario I'll have to be honest, I believe in the most. And then there's another scenario where both people where they live and work begins to move out of the downtown core. The suburbs become wildly revitalized. And then there's an opportunity to rethink suburbs. I know I'm a glass half full person, Suling, so I tend to look at opportunity either way. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Well, and that's why we appreciate having you here, because it'd be very easy to look at the talent issue, the future of work, as nothing but full of challenges. But the way you've presented it is really as opportunities. And we'd love to continue the conversation about how businesses get there, because if we look at sort of your future vision of the unleashed workforce, right, and where we are today, where are we as a business community on that continuum, and like how fast paced are we toward working toward that model?
Well, one thing that I've heard over and over again from clients over the last year when they're talking about next normal is I'm going to say 100% of them will tell me a story at some point about something remarkable that they did as a business in the last 2 years.
Okay.
You look at the federal government, they rolled out CERB.
Yeah.
I will submit to you that if that was an idea that came up in government before COVID, it would have taken years to implement. They did it in weeks.
Every program they rolled out.
In weeks.
In weeks. Right.
And the private sector did it too. Suling, I think I told you the story about my pool supply company.
Yeah.
And it was interesting timing for those in the pool supply business because COVID happened just as pools were opening. And actually their demand just went through the roof. Suddenly everybody decided they wanted one of them. But they had a problem. They couldn't open their stores. And this one local small, I think multi-store, but 3-store pool supplier added an AI chatbot to their website, and they did it within a week.
Mhm.
And that was clearly a business owner that recognized these technologies are out there. They're available. A lot of them are plug and play, and a lot of them are not very expensive.
Mhm.
So again, there's really remarkable things done in very short periods of time. But here's something to think about. Why? How did that happen? And there's a concept we talk about sometimes called dynamic outcomes. And what it means is we're seeing it, we saw it even before COVID in the automotive industry, where rather than always just being focused on how many cars can we sell within what period, within what geographies, they're releasing more and more of their workforce to dynamic goals, like we want to be carbon neutral by 2035.
Mhm.
There's no process map to
Mhm.
figure out how to do that. You have to
Mhm.
release people to think about that goal, to have accountability for that goal, and to try things.
Yeah. And that's what makes this really exciting times, right?
Right, because
Right.
rather than going back to the way we worked in 2019, how can we think about the dynamic goals that our business needs to set, and
Mhm.
who are we going to make accountable, and
Mhm.
how are we going to make sure they have time to think differently about where we're headed?
That's right. So, Stephen, we do have a few questions here, if you're still open.
Of course.
How can our K to 12 education system evolve to prepare our kids for the future of work? That's a great question.
It is, and I think the K to 12 sort of ethos is already on the right track.
Okay.
One of the things that is big in education these days is teaching people to learn. So, and I've been also really pleased to see that most classrooms in Canada have begun to really welcome technology in. So there was a period there where it was kind of, oh, the cell phones are going to distract the students, and there was a lot of worry about that. And I think that's still an issue. But we're seeing more and more classrooms recognize that actually the power in the hands of students today is incredible. And if we can teach them how to investigate a question on their own independently, rather than traditional classroom learning, sort of always being the talking head at the top front of the room, disseminating knowledge and then testing memory, more often students are being asked to investigate, understand, and present back what they've learned.
Mhm.
And that is a lifelong learning skill. I do think, it would be interesting to see K to 12 focus on what I was calling enduring capabilities.
Mhm.
And we as a business community, I think, have to do a better job identifying what those architecture skills I described are.
Mhm.
Educators can't build skills we haven't described to them.
Yep, for
There's a
sure.
real cooperation that has to happen there.
I agree. That's fantastic. Is there data on the average age of those 40% who are planning on leaving their positions?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think it's in
Yeah.
the study, but I would suspect that that it's really not tilting too hard toward one age group or another. I will tell you, this is observational. I don't have data to back this, but when we do focus groups with workforces that are talking about hybrid models, the people who are really eager to return to the office, it is pretty spread out, but it's, I think, denser in younger populations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not too surprising, because
Mm-hmm.
you just have to think about the experience of folks who have been working in generally they have smaller footprints for their homes. Maybe they're working in a condo off the side of their kitchen table. And they're not at that stage of life yet where, family is the main thing. They're interested in social. They're interested in learning from their peers, creating social connections. So I would suspect that's a hint at the reasons that people are thinking of leaving work are different
Mm-hmm.
based on their stage of life. And we can be really thoughtful about making sure that we're, from an almost human-centered design perspective, thinking about their experience, what they need out of work, and making sure we're thoughtfully designing those experiences for those different age groups.
That's a good point, and consistent with some of the things that we've heard from our businesses too, that younger people are looking for opportunities to interact, to be mentored, make connections, for the purposes of promotion or those kinds of things that are are more traditional. One of the key components of the future of work is green jobs to combat climate change. You may not know this. I think this is for Ottawa. How's the Ottawa economy making progressive shifts in this area? I know you're from here, but I'm not sure that that's your...
I am from here, but that's not really my area.
No.
I will say, like, there's tremendous things being done in the incubation centers here in Ottawa.
Mhm.
One of the first companies that I came across, we have a greenhouse here in Ottawa. Damned if I can remember the name of the facility. You probably know, Suling. But there is a, I think it's called Grocer.
Oh, yes, yes. Mhm.
What an amazing business model.
Yeah.
So, you know, they take these containers and fill them with everything you need hydroponically to grow fresh produce
Mhm.
anywhere in Canada.
Mhm.
And they're a social enterprise, so they're not profit motive isn't first. What an incredible impact they're having on sustainability in the North in particular. So I think the ideas are here in Ottawa, and the infrastructure around incubation of startups is
Mhm.
tremendous.
I agree.
We just need to lean in.
Yeah, for sure. You noted that past future of work experts consistently, I don't know if you said that, get the pace of change wrong. What is your prediction for the duration of the transition from now to your end state? I think that's kind of the question that I asked.
So when does the fourth industrial revolution end is packed up in that question. Yeah, and there's a reason why people get it wrong, but I hope that what you took away from what I said is that we can get the pace of change wrong. I'm a big Marshall McLuhan fan, by the way. If you know him, he's a Canadian thinker. He said the medium is the message.
Okay.
So what that means is that the technology itself is communicating something to us far more powerful than the content in that technology. So the example that's often used is the television reorganized the household. It reorganized consumerism. It completely changed our behavior because, and it doesn't matter what's on television. What matters is the technology itself. And the other example I use these days is our electronic calendars. So what does our electronic calendar say? It says that your life, Suling, and mine is 30-minute increments that anybody can access at a whim. And that's why when we moved out of the physical office, for those of us that have been working from home, we end up sometimes with 10, 11-hour days of nonstop meetings. That's the message of the technology. It's stronger than us. So, when I think about trends, that's how I tend to think about them. I try to stay out of the prediction game, but I focus very much on the power of the technologies to change the way we organize ourselves. And then I try to put ourselves in a position where we have agency, where we can actually say, you know what? I don't like what that technology is doing to my business. I'm going to take steps to make sure that we are mitigating that or even looking at different technologies. So I end up with the impacts I'm looking for.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's all of the questions we had. So I guess I'll just turn it over to you, Stephen. If you had a piece of advice for our business community on how to move forward from here as it relates to the future of work, what would be the top one or two things that you would suggest that we look at first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most powerful idea to me is the idea that we can architect work. In my business, that's a future job in the business that I'm trying to build. I want to build what we're thinking of as work architects. Imagine we can find people that both know talent management and technology. I want them to have one brain so that they can look at a job, look at work, and actually begin to re-architect it at the source, at the work, not at the technology. And then use that as a target for how we want to make work different in the future and drive business results. I can't tell you where we've done that, how excited the business leaders get about where their business could go, but probably more importantly, how excited the people in that job get about what their work could look like in the future. And isn't that the opposite of the tech change experience we've all had, where actually we bring the technology in and everybody gets very nervous and resistant?
Yeah.
It's because they don't know where their work is going.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes sense, Suling, but I think that's a powerful idea. It's something any of us can do. And it's a really interesting way to lead our businesses into the future.
I appreciate that thought. And I just want to emphasize something that you said was powerful to me, because I know a lot of, not all, but a lot of small, medium enterprises have really been, had to work hard over these last 19 months. And I really want to emphasize your position that this is a time of tremendous opportunity actually for SMEs, because they do have the ability to shift and adapt quickly and have access to tools that even bigger companies would have a hard time transitioning to.
100%. I'm going to be working very hard to make sure that large employers in Canada do shift and pivot, but it's going to be hard for everybody. It's not easy when you're big. I agree. Size is an advantage these days.
Good. Well, thank you, Stephen. I know that you are a very busy professional. We're very grateful to you and to Deloitte for being here with us today, and for the work that you continue to do with us moving forward for our economic growth in here in Ottawa. So it was a pleasure being here with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope everyone did enjoy that presentation as much as I did. I'll be going over that recording time and again to try and sort of reinforce those thoughts that Stephen had shared with us today that would be valuable to any business and to us as economic developers as well. Thank you to everyone who did the questions. And I think before we go to our break, we do have a video to share, Jared, that was given to us by one of our sponsors, our key sponsor, actually, RBC. So please roll video. Thanks, Justin. Obviously, that video was what was supposed to be run before when I had called on Justin. So my apologies. Thank you, RBC, for sponsoring and for the thoughtful work that you're doing on this file in Ottawa as well. We're now going to take a short 10-minute networking break before coming back to hear from our next panel, Lessons Learned from Ottawa's Best Places to Work Award recipients. So don't forget to move around the table and meet as many people as you can. Also, we do have 2 floors, so make sure you check out who's on another floor as well. We'll see you in 10.